Welcome back to the report. Now, in a photo finish, Colombian voters surprised the country after they voted no to the historic peace deal between the FARC rebels and the Colombian government. Afzal Ahmed has more on this story.
The mood was somber in Havana, Cuba, as FARC members watched news from Colombia that a 4-year peace deal to end their 5-decade conflict was voted down. The surprise victory for the no camp poured cold water on international optimism to end the longest-running conflict in the Americas. The no camp narrowly won by 50.21% to the yes camp's 49.78%, with voter turnout only at 37%. The commander of the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, known as Timoshenko, expressed his commitment to peace despite the verdict.
The People's Army, the FARC, profoundly regret the destructive power of those who have sowed hate and rancor, who have influenced the opinion of the Colombian people. With today's result, we know that our challenge as a political movement is even greater, and we will have to be stronger to create a stable and lasting peace.
The yes camp back in Bogota, Colombia, were in tears as results came in. Although the Colombian president, Juan Manuel Santos, accepted the no result, he said a ceasefire would continue and play down any threats of the vote to the country's security.
I call on those who decided to or not to support the agreement to end the conflict with FARC. The majority, by the slimmest of margins, has said no. I'm the first person to recognize this result. The other half of the country has said yes. As the head of state, I am the guarantor for stability in this nation. This is a democratic decision and it should not affect the stability which I will guarantee.
Santos vowed to sit down with the no camp to discuss the way forward, and he will also send his chief negotiator back to Cuba to meet with FARC. The no camp's main reason for opposing the deal was that it was giving too many concessions to the rebels, but they too wanted peace. Colombia's powerful former president Alvaro Uribe, a one-time ally and a fierce no campaigner, may now hold the key to any potential renegotiation with the FARC.
We want to contribute to a national accord in which they listen to our point of view. We know that when our countrymen who supported yes hear our message of good faith, they will listen to us, and we will listen to each other. We ask the same of the government, its negotiators, and the international community.
The peace accord reached last month and signed a week ago offered the possibility that rebel fighters would hand in their weapons to the United Nations, confess their crimes, and form a political party rooted in the Marxist ideology. That enraged no supporters, including Uribe, who argued the rebels should serve jail terms and never be permitted to enter politics. The FARC already softened its stance in the original negotiation, publicly admitting for the first time it trafficked drugs, recruited minors, and committed human rights violations, including massacres. President Santos said a no vote would mean a return to war, and opinion polls had predicted he would win comfortably. However, with one prediction marginally wrong, the other probably wouldn't materialize either. But peace, for how long? Afzal Ahmed, The Report.
Joining me now to discuss this is Hanna Wallis, who's a staff writer at the Latin American News Dispatch, covering Indigenous issues in Cauca in Colombia. Welcome to the programme. And also joining me on the line from Medellin in Colombia is Oli Griffin. Oli, starting with you, who's in Colombia, how can you explain this vote? I mean, you were in one of the areas, Medellin, when Uribe was campaigning for a no vote. He got that no vote. What lay behind this? Oli.
Well, the main driver behind this is that people felt that the reparations were, the money that the government was going to pay to the FARC was just simply too much. It amounted for a lot of people here in Antioquia to being saying rewarding criminal and violent behavior. Amongst other things, there's just this sensation that the impunity that was being offered to certain commanders within the FARC, the fact that they could confess crimes and then escape jail sentences was just too much for a lot of people to bear. There's a lot of hurt here after 50 years of war, so not overly surprising, but this is Uribe's heartland. It's where he's most popular. It's where he was campaigning very hard, and it's not really talking to people on the street. They seem to be quite happy with the result, and they hope that the renegotiations can sort of take forward this sort of peace process now.
I mean, Hanna, did Santos overplay his hands? I mean, he was already talking about he was going to get a Nobel Peace Prize for delivering this peace package. Did people turn around and say, well, your ego is too great here?
For me, I don't think that ego should be part of the conversation in terms of, I think that Santos was, he took some risks in allowing for the vote to be ratified by the public at large. They easily could have had that not be part of the negotiations at all. So from my perspective, I think that there were definitely gambles in how it was set up. But, if the yes vote had won, it would have been a matter of the population at large deciding that they're willing to compromise for the larger goal, the larger collective goal of, creating a peaceful country.
And can I ask both of you, but Oli first, where does this leave the peace process in Colombia?
Well, at the moment, they're sort of talking about going forward with negotiations. Both Santos and Timochenko have just stated quite publicly that they intend to carry on with the peace process. Santos himself has said that he wants to fight and look for peace until the last minute of his presidency, although that time is running out. It's unknown whether a successor would be, from which party they would come from. If they came from Centro Democrático, which is Álvaro Uribe's party, it's quite possible that the peace process could be unsettled, but that's still a way off yet. They've gone back to Havana. The negotiations are back on, but it has sort of proven that the claims that there would be no budging and no renegotiation was false.
And Hanna, do you see that the peace process can continue after this result?
I think so, absolutely. I mean, both Santos and Timochenko have committed to, upholding the ceasefire and also their willingness to return to the negotiations. I think that it's likely that only a few points of the accord will have to adapt in order to, placate Uribe and the political interests he represents. I think that the most contentious aspects of the accord regard the transitional justice program, and the FARC's access to politics. So hopefully, if they can bring in the voices, that have been the strongest proponents of the no vote, they can only refine those points and uphold a lot of the other programs that are already in place.
Now, Oli, this is the longest insurgency that the world has seen in recent years. What has fueled FARC's campaign over those years?
Well, over those years, it's sort of been a question of political participation. To be honest, a lot of this stems back way before this conflict, back to La Violencia in Colombia, which was a war fought between, or a conflict fought between the conservatives and the liberals, which really sort of set the staging ground for the war with the FARC. It's a lot of lack of being able to participate in the political process for rural Colombians. There are areas that literally haven't had any involvement from the state for decades, and part of the peace deal with hope is, the government can now move into those areas. But this is what fueled it. It started off as a means to fight the state and to gain some sort of political control, and then was sadly sort of fueled throughout the 80s and 90s with drug money, coca crops, and the FARC are one of the largest, if not the largest, producer of coca plants. And so this is sort of exacerbated by drugs as well.
So, Hanna, the Colombian government has had a dreadful human rights record. Has this improved under Costa in recent years?
I can tell you about my perspective from where I was reporting locally. So I was down in Cauca, which is one of the areas where the conflict has hit hardest. And in one of the towns where I spent the longest reporting, in Toribio, they've had more attacks than almost any other part of the country by the FARC. And in the past 2 years, they haven't had a single hostility, which is a very dramatic change from how life was before the negotiations began. So I think in certain areas where the conflict has been most pronounced, this peace process is not just symbolic, it's really something that is palpable day to day, and how people aren't suffering the same violence that they were beforehand. So yeah, I think that the potential changes it can bring and what it's already affected are significant and worth emphasizing.
And Oli, do you see this result as possibly leading to a shift to the right in Colombia with Uribe making a comeback?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, a lot of people have already sort of said that this is a sign that the world as a whole is shifting to the right. It mirrors Brexit. People have already sort of started using a little bit, not very often, but using the hashtag FARCit. There's a real liking between the two. And, maybe it is. But at the same time, this doesn't seem to be the end of the peace process. There seems to be a lot of people who still have problems. It was a very, very narrow victory. I mean, we're talking less than 0.5% of the result. And so, I don't know. It could be that. I think it's important to remember just how much hurt is also here after almost, more than half a century of war. And that's going to take some time to heal. And maybe with if Santos goes and he's not very popular, it could help the peace process in the future. But I don't think he's going to resign. I do think the peace process will continue.
And Hanna, one of the strange things from outsiders' point of view is the low turnout in this referendum.
That's right. Yeah, it's quite disappointing. It's also, though, it's not inconsistent with abstention rates from every election. So, it's crazy that so few people came out to vote, but it's not different than presidential elections in the past. But if you look at where the yes and no votes won regionally, the areas that were most, a lot of the regions that have been hit hardest by the conflict had overwhelming yes majority votes. So really, a lot of the victims were saying that this was something that they were willing to endorse.
Well, Hanna and Oli, thank you very much. I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this episode of The Report. I want to thank all my guests on today's show and thank you at home for watching. Do remember that you can keep up with us on Twitter by following @IslamChannelCA and by using the hashtag #TheReport. But for now, we'll leave you with scenes from Jordan, where the 16th Amman International Book Fair has been held in the nation's capital, which is aimed at rebuilding people's interest in the printed word. We'll be back tomorrow, but until then, good night.